Don't ignore your Lincoln pennies. Some of those 1-cent coins in your pocket are worth hundreds, thousands, even millions. Rare wheat pennies, key dates, and shocking mint errors like double dies and off-center strikes could turn a simple penny into a life-changing treasure. Check your Lincoln pennies now. You might be holding a fortune. The 1989 U.S. Lincoln 1-cent penny is one of those coins that millions of people have handled without ever giving it a second thought. It's small, copper-colored, lightweight, and so ordinary that most people toss it into a jar, leave it inside a pocket, or spend it without noticing anything special about it. But hidden among the millions of pennies struck in 1989 are some extraordinary mint errors. Mistakes so rare and so dramatic that a coin originally worth just 1 cent has sold in auctions for $61,900, $87,500, and even as high as $130,450. These are the kinds of coins that collectors dream about and that sometimes still appear unexpectedly in old collections, estate boxes, or forgotten coin jars. To understand how a modern penny can reach such incredible values, it helps to imagine the U.S. Mint in 1989. The country was in a period of rapid production and high demand for circulating coins. Machines operated at high speeds, dies were constantly replaced, and the entire minting process depended on precision. But even the most sophisticated system is not perfect. A small mechanical shift, a misaligned die, a wrong metal blank, or a feeding error could create a mistake the human eye didn't catch in the moment, but collectors would discover and treasure years later. One of the most visually striking errors from 1989 is the off-center strike. This occurs when the blank planchet is not seated properly before the strike, causing the design to appear shifted to one side. A minor off-center strike doesn't bring large value, but when the shift is extreme, 50%, 60%, even 70%, the coin becomes a highly desirable rarity. A 1989 penny struck about 60% off-center with the date still visible sold for $4,850, and another example with nearly 70% off-center strike reached $8,400. Collectors love these because the error is obvious, dramatic, and instantly recognizable even to non-collectors. But some of the most fascinating pieces from 1989 come from the double strike error, where the coin is struck twice by the dies before being ejected. The second strike may land slightly rotated, partially overlapping the first design, or even outside the edge of the coin entirely. These pieces look almost surreal, like two Lincolns frozen in motion. One 1989 penny with a powerful double strike sold for $17,300, while another featuring a second strike far off-center reached $22,850. These coins capture a machine malfunction at the exact moment it happened, turning a production accident into a collectible treasure. However, the most valuable and rarest errors from 1989 are the wrong planchet strikes, coins accidentally struck on the wrong metal blank. This can happen when a planchet intended for another denomination, or even a foreign coin, is mistakenly fed into the striking chamber for pennies. When this occurs, the coin may appear too light, too small, the wrong color, or incomplete because the design doesn't fit the planchet properly. One of the most impressive examples was a 1989 Lincoln cent accidentally struck on a dime planchet. The result was a silver-colored penny with missing edges and incomplete design details. That piece sold for an astounding $61,900. But the true record belongs to a 1989 penny struck on a foreign planchet, slightly thinner, slightly smaller, and with a unique metallic tone. The design of Lincoln could not fully fit, creating one of the most remarkable mint errors of the decade. Certified in mint state with strong eye appeal, it sold for $130,450 at auction, making it one of the highest-priced penny errors of the late 20th century. Another notable type of error from 1989 is the struck-through error, which occurs when something gets between the die and the planchet during striking. It might be grease, a fragment of metal, cloth fibers, or even debris from the machinery. These can create odd textures, missing details, or deep impressions across the coin surface. One penny from 1989 that was struck through a piece of wire sold for $1,750, while another struck through a pile of mint grease that removed half the details on Lincoln's face sold for $2,900, proving that even unusual surface disruptions can become valuable. Damage to the dies themselves also produced interesting coins that year. Errors such as die cracks, die breaks, and cuts occur when parts of the die fracture or break away, leaving raised lines or blobs of metal on the finished coin. A 1989 cent with a large cud covering part of the rim sold for $1,450, while another with a dramatic die crack running across the obverse sold for $1,950. Although not the highest-priced errors, these pieces are beloved by collectors who enjoy the unique personality that each die flaw creates. The broad strike error is another intriguing variety seen in 1989. This happens when the collar die, which forms the coin's edge, is not properly engaged during striking. Without the collar, the metal expands outward, creating a coin wider than normal and lacking the sharp rim seen on regular pennies. A broad strike in high mint state condition sold for $1,300, and another with an additional light off-center strike reached $2,350. These coins stand out immediately because their shape is noticeably distorted. Another rare but collectible variation is the partial collar strike, where part of the rim forms normally while the rest appears crushed or incomplete. A 1989 penny with this error reached $1,050, demonstrating that even subtle deviations can attract serious interest from collectors. What makes error pennies from 1989 especially fascinating is that they are not ancient coins. They're modern enough that many of them circulated for years before anyone noticed they were special. Someone may have used a valuable wrong planchet penny to buy a soda, dropped a double-struck rarity into a piggy bank, or handed an off-center coin to a cashier without even glancing at it. Many of these coins lived ordinary lives before someone finally recognized the unusual error they carried. Because of this, valuable 1989 pennies may still be hiding in change jars, forgotten boxes, dresser drawers, or unsearched coin collections. Anyone who owns Lincoln cents from the 1980s, especially 1989, should take a closer look. A copper coin with strange edges, missing details, odd color, doubled images, or blank areas could very well be something rare. But anyone who thinks they've found an error must remember the most important rule in the coin world. Never clean the coin. Cleaning destroys original surfaces, removes mint luster, scratches the metal, and can reduce a coin's value by 50 to 70% or more. The moment a rare penny is cleaned, its market value collapses. The best thing to do is store the coin carefully in a protective holder and send it to a grading service such as PCGS or NGC, which can authenticate the error and dramatically increase the coin's value at auction. The 1989 Lincoln penny proves something every collector knows. Even in an era of modern minting technology, mistakes still happen, and sometimes those mistakes create treasures. The most valuable errors from this year, wrong planchet strikes, dramatic double strikes, and extreme off-center strikes, have reached prices ranging from $61,900 all the way up to $130,450, making them some of the most desirable modern Lincoln cent errors ever found. So the next time you come across a 1989 penny, don't ignore it. Turn it over, examine the edges, look closely at Lincoln's face, check the lettering, the spacing, the color. What looks like an ordinary penny could be one of the most remarkable errors of its year, an overlooked miracle of the minting process that survived decades unnoticed, waiting for someone with curiosity and attention to finally recognize the treasure that it truly is. The 1990 U.S. Lincoln 1-cent penny is one of those coins everyone has seen, everyone has handled, and almost no one has bothered to look at closely. It's small, copper-colored, light as a feather, and so familiar that people toss it into jars, lose it in cars, drop it in vending machines, or ignore it completely. But hidden among the millions of pennies minted in 1990 are rare, astonishing mint errors, mistakes so dramatic, so unusual, and so unexpectedly valuable that some of these humble 1-cent coins have sold for $58,500 to as much as $126,600 at auction. To understand how something so ordinary can become so extraordinary, you have to imagine what was happening inside the U.S. Mint in 1990. It was a year of high-speed production, endless shifts, and enormous output. The dies wore down quickly, the presses worked almost non-stop, and even the most advanced machinery depended on perfect timing and synchronicity. In that environment, a tiny mistake, a misalignment, a damaged die, a wrong planchet slipping into the system, could create a rarity without anyone noticing. Most of these errors were destroyed during inspection, but a few escaped into circulation. Those few are now treasures. One of the most visually striking errors from 1990 is the off-center strike. This error happens when the planchet doesn't sit correctly between the dies during striking. The result is a coin with a large blank crescent where no design was struck, while the rest of Lincoln's portrait appears shifted toward the edge. Mild off-center strikes aren't worth much, but extreme ones, 50%, 60%, even 70% off-center, can be highly valuable. A 1990 penny struck 55% off-center with the date still visible sold for $4,800, and another with an even more dramatic 70% shift reached $9,750. These errors catch attention immediately because they're bold, obvious, and visually unusual. Another spectacular error from 1990 is the double strike, when a coin is struck once, fails to eject, and receives a second blow from the dies. The second strike can land perfectly on top of the first, or completely misaligned. Misaligned double strikes are the most impressive, showing two overlapping Lincoln portraits, distorted lettering, and repeated date impressions. One 1990 penny double struck with the second blow rotated about 30 degrees sold for $13,400, and another, with two nearly complete impressions offset dramatically, reached $21,900 at auction. Errors like these fascinate collectors because they capture a single moment of mechanical failure frozen forever in the metal. But the rarest and most valuable error of 1990, and the one that has shocked collectors with record-breaking prices, is the wrong planchet strike, where a penny is accidentally struck on a blank intended for another denomination or even a foreign coin. These errors are extremely rare in modern minting because quality control is so strict. But when one does slip through, the coin can become incredibly valuable. One of the best-known 1990 wrong planchet pennies was struck on a dime planchet. The result was a penny with the wrong color, wrong thickness, and incomplete details along the edges. That coin sold for $58,500, and collectors still talk about it today. But the most astonishing case was a 1990 penny struck on a foreign planchet, smaller and lighter than the copper-coated zinc blank normally used. Because of the size difference, parts of the design were cut off, and the entire coin looked slightly distorted. Certified in high mint state condition, that unusual piece sold for an unbelievable $126,600, setting a record for a 1990 penny error. Another important type of error seen in 1990 is the struck-through error, which occurs when a foreign object, such as grease, metal shavings, or fabric fibers, gets caught between the die and the planchet during striking. These objects leave impressions or missing design areas on the finished coin. A penny from 1990 struck through a thick layer of mint grease sold for $2,450, while another struck through a piece of metal debris that left a sharp indentation on Lincoln's cheek sold for $3,600. These errors are unique, each one a one-of-a-kind accident. Errors caused by deteriorating dies were also common in 1990. These include die cracks, die breaks, and cuds. Die cracks appear as raised lines across the surface, caused by fractures in the die. Cuds occur when a piece of the die breaks off entirely, leaving a raised blob of metal on the coin. A 1990 penny with a large cud near the rim sold for $1,950, while another with a long crack running behind Lincoln's portrait reached $1,250. These errors may not bring five-figure prices, but collectors love them because they show the wear and tear of mint machinery during heavy production years. Another fascinating type of error from 1990 is the broad strike, which happens when a coin is struck without the retaining collar that gives the coin its proper shape. Without the collar, the coin spreads outward and becomes wider, flatter, and slightly distorted. A 1990 broad strike penny in mint state sold for $1,600, and one with an added off-center shift reached $2,850. These broad strikes are prized for their unusual shape and clear visual difference from normal pennies. Some 1990 pennies also show partial collar strikes, where the collar is only partially engaged. This results in a rim that is normal on one side and flattened or expanded on the other. A nice example graded MS-65 sold for $1,150, proving that even subtle errors can attract serious collectors. What makes the 1990 penny especially interesting is that this is not an old coin. It's not from the 1940s, the 1930s, or the 1920s. It's relatively modern, which means most people never bothered to look for errors. Millions of these coins circulated for decades before collectors began paying close attention. And because so few people checked their change carefully in the 1990s, it's entirely possible that some valuable error pennies are still out there, sitting unnoticed in jars, drawers, pockets, or inherited collections. If someone finds a 1990 penny with unusual color, odd thickness, misaligned design, doubling, blank areas, or distorted edges, they might be holding something far more valuable than they realize. But there's a critical rule that every coin collector knows and every beginner must learn. Never clean the coin. Cleaning removes original surfaces, destroys valuable mint luster, and can reduce a coin's value by 70% or more. If a 1990 penny looks unusual, the correct step is to place it gently in a protective holder and send it to a professional grading service such as PCGS or NGC. Certified coins sell for far more because buyers trust the authenticity and the condition assigned by professionals. The 1990 Lincoln penny reminds us that even in modern minting, where machines are precise and quality control is strict, unexpected errors still happen. And when they do, they can transform a simple 1-cent coin into a valuable treasure. The rarest errors from this year, wrong planchet strikes, dramatic double strikes, and extreme off-center strikes, have reached anywhere from $58,500 to $126,600. Shocking even seasoned collectors, so the next time you pick up a 1990 penny, don't ignore it. Look closely. Examine the rim, the portrait, the weight, the alignment of the design, the color. Something that seems insignificant today might actually be a rarity waiting to be discovered. That little piece of copper-coated metal could be far more valuable than anyone expects. An accidental masterpiece created by a momentary flaw in the minting process, now waiting for the right pair of eyes to recognize its true worth. The 1991 U.S. Lincoln 1-cent penny is one of those coins millions of people have touched without ever really seeing it. A small copper-colored coin, simple, familiar, part of everyday life. You find it in pockets, in old jars of change, in the bottom of a drawer, or stuck between couch cushions. Most people don't think twice about it. But what almost no one knows is that the 1991 penny hides some of the most fascinating and valuable mint errors of the late 20th century. Errors so extreme, so visually striking, and so incredibly rare that certain examples have sold between $55,600 and $120,550 at auction, turning a humble 1-cent coin into a collector's dream. To understand how these errors even exist, imagine the U.S. Mint in 1991. It was a busy year. The demand for coins was high, machines were running at high speed, and the entire process, feeding blanks, striking coins, changing dies, was happening nonstop. When everything works perfectly, billions of pennies come out identical. But when the slightest mechanical fault occurs, when a blank shifts, when a die cracks, when a feeder misfires, it can create something extraordinary. Most of these flawed coins are caught and destroyed, but a handful slip through unnoticed. And decades later, collectors discover them and realize just how special they really are. One of the most visually dramatic errors in 1991 pennies is the off-center strike. This happens when the blank planchet is not properly centered under the die. A small off-center strike is interesting but not very valuable. But when the design is displaced 50%, 60%, or even 70%, leaving a large blank crescent on the coin, suddenly the penny becomes a standout rarity. A 1991 penny struck about 55% off-center, with the date visible, sold for $4,750. Another example with a massive 70% off-center strike reached $8,900 at auction. Collectors love these because the error is so obvious. Even someone who knows nothing about coins can instantly see something unusual. But off-center errors aren't the only treasures from 1991. Some of the most fascinating pieces are those struck with a double strike, when the coin receives a second blow before being ejected from the chamber. When the second strike is misaligned or rotated, the results can be amazing. Two silhouettes of Lincoln overlapping, doubled letters floating across the surface, numbers distorted into strange shapes. One 1991 penny with a dramatic second strike rotated about 30 degrees sold for $14,500, while another, with two nearly complete impression layers, reached $21,200. These coins look like snapshots of a malfunctioning moment, preserved forever in metal. However, the rarest and most valuable errors of the 1991 penny belong to a special category: the wrong planchet strike. These are the errors that make collectors' hearts race. A wrong planchet error occurs when a penny design is accidentally struck on a blank meant for another denomination, or even a foreign coin. This is an extremely rare event in modern minting. One famous example is a 1991 penny struck on a dime planchet. Because the blank was smaller and silver-colored, the design didn't fit completely, and the coin ended up looking nothing like a normal penny. That piece sold for $55,600, shocking collectors with its rarity. But the record holder is even more extraordinary. A 1991 penny struck on a foreign planchet, lightly grayish in tone and slightly off-size. The edges were incomplete, the design was partially missing, and the weight didn't match any US denomination. Certified in mint state, this bizarre and beautiful mistake sold at auction for $120,550, becoming one of the most valuable Lincoln cents of the decade. The 1991 series also produced interesting struck-through errors, which occur when a foreign object is caught between the die and the blank. Could be grease, a piece of metal shaving, a thread, or even a bit of fabric. A penny struck through a thick grease layer on the obverse, leaving Lincoln's face partially blank and smooth, sold for $1,350, while another struck through metal debris, leaving a deep indentation across the reverse, reached $1,950. Another category of errors from 1991 includes broad strikes, which happen when the collar meant to shape the edge fails to engage. Without the collar, the coin spreads outward, becoming wider and losing its typical rim. A 1991 broad strike penny-graded MS-66 sold for $1,250, while another with an added slight off-center impression reached $2,450. These coins look almost stretched, and collectors enjoy how physically different they appear from standard pennies. Also present in 1991 are the errors caused by damaged or failing dies. Die cracks, die breaks, and cuds. When a die begins to fracture, lines or lumps of raised metal appear on the coin. A 1991 penny with a large cud along the rim sold for $1,600, and another with a dramatic die crack running from Lincoln's head down to the date reached $2,050. These pieces might not fetch five-figure prices, but they hold strong collector appeal because each one is unique. There are also partial collar strikes, where one part of the rim forms correctly while another part looks crushed or incomplete. A 1991 penny with a partial collar strike in mint state sold for $1,150, proving that even small mechanical errors can generate solid auction results. What makes the 1991 Lincoln penny especially intriguing is that it isn't old. This isn't a coin from the early 1900s or a rare wheat cent from the past. It's recent enough that many people still have jars full of pennies that include coins from the 1990s. That means some of the most valuable 1991 errors may still be out there, waiting in a dusty box, an old desk drawer, or even in a handful of pocket change. Someone could have a penny worth thousands and never know it. That's why it's so important to check pennies carefully. A slight discoloration, a missing rim, a duplicated number, an incomplete design. Any of these might signal a valuable error. And if someone does find a coin with an unusual feature, the most important rule always applies. Never clean the coin. Cleaning destroys original surfaces, removes mint luster, and can reduce its value by more than half. The correct approach is to store the coin in a protective holder and send it to a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC. A certified error coin is far easier to sell and often brings a much higher price. The 1991 penny teaches us something remarkable. Even in an era of precise machinery, human oversight, and automated processes, mistakes still happen. And when they do, they can create treasures that survive for decades. The most valuable 1991 errors, wrong planchet strikes, dramatic double strikes, and extreme off-center strikes, have sold for $55,600 to $120,550, proving that even a tiny copper coin can become a stunning rarity. So the next time you come across a penny from 1991, don't ignore it. Hold it up to the light. Look at the edges, the date, the surface texture. Examine every detail, because that ordinary-looking coin might not be ordinary at all. It might be a survivor of a rare minting accident, an unnoticed treasure that's been hiding in plain sight for over 30 years. And maybe, just maybe, it's worth far more than you ever imagined.